Zeke and Jane waited several minutes before coming out of the bush. They noticed some walkers were approaching the bodies while the two people were killed and left behind by Jed's group. Zeke and Jane went over to the bodies. Zeke noticed took out the approaching walkers with a couple arrows. Meanwhile, Jane looked over at the bodies. "There's nothing on them," Jane muttered. Zeke pulled out his two arrows from the walkers before he joined Jane. Several walkers limped towards them, but there was enough distance between them and the undead creatures that they didn't pose any immediate threat. Jane shook her head and said, "We need to move on." "Agreed," Jane huffed. Jane got up and left the area as the two walkers gorged the bodies. Zeke huffed as they came into a small clearing. He sat down by a nearby log while Jane washed her face with a nearby river. There were a few seconds of silence aside from Jane splashing her face. It must have been her other way to calm herself down. Anyone who they just witnessed would be on edge. She finished and dried herself on the pants. "I haven't seen anything like that in a while. Those guys might have had a grudge against each other," Zeke said. Damn it. I really hope our group didn't run into those guys." Jane looked at him and said, "Same here. They're well armed and they're ruthless. The thing that worries me, though, is how those guys look at that kid. Carver ruled with an iron fist and was respected out of fear. That kid from that group, he is respected for a different reason. Those men trust him." Zeke nodded. However, there was something on his mind. Something that bugged him. Why would they take the bodies of those two guys? I hope they weren't what I think they are," Zeke said. "Cannibals?" Jane muttered. She confirmed what she was thinking. It only made sense from overhearing their conversations. Now Zeke was even more nervous. If those men had found their group, they would be in serious trouble, and he feared that his group would have already been at the chopping block. He shook his head and tried to get rid of those thoughts. I ran into a group of cannibals before. They always made sure to aim for the head to prevent a person from turning. And well, those guys were the same way. They always aimed for the head instead of the body," Jane said. Zeke nodded and said, "What do we do? What if our group's caught by them?" Before Jane could respond, another voice was heard. It was someone they didn't know. "Then they're already dead." They turned to see another man who appeared to be in his early 40s approaching them. He wore a blue hat, black leather jacket with a tan hooded sweatshirt underneath, a pair of blue jeans, and a pair of gray boots. He was carrying a handgun which was aimed at Jane. "Right, you know the drill. All weapons on the ground. Back away slowly. You make one move like that and don't like, and I'll shoot you." Jane was surprised that the man had caught him off guard. He was rather stealthy, given his age. She dropped the knife in possession while Zeke dropped his bow and arrows and the knife. The man looked over the weapons while looking at the Jane. "Come on, girl, I wasn't born yesterday. All weapons?" Jane grumbled before she took her pocket knife from her boot and tossed it to the ground. "Good. Now I suppose you don't have much food, medicine, or supplies, do you?" "Not much," Zeke said, very uncomfortable with this man. This reminded him of too much of when he and Decker had been held up by a psycho. However, this guy seemed to be a bit more standard compared to the psycho he dealt with almost 2 years ago. "Hand it over," the man said. Giving no choice, Zeke obliged and handed his backpack over to the man. The man checked the backpack and shook his head. "Not much in here." "That's all we got, asshole," Jane said. "Oh, feisty. I like it," the man said. "Tell you what, how about you and I have some alone time away from that kid, and I'll leave you both alone." Jane glared at the man. There was a good long tense pause before Jane said, "Fine, what do you have someplace in mind?" Zeke was shocked by why even she would agree to this request. He gave her a disgruntled look before the man took her by the arm. "Come with me, babe." He turned to Zeke, and he said, "We'll be back in a few minutes." Before he could finish, Jane kneeled down and kicked the man in the groin. He groaned in pain as he fell to his knees and started coughing. Jane wrestled the gun out of his grip and aimed at him. Zeke was surprised by this. She was waiting for the opportunity for the man to lower his guard. "Get your stuff," Jane told Zeke. Zeke nodded, went over to his bow and arrows and his knife. He also grabbed Jane's knives. The man wheezed as he tried to catch his breath. "Damn, I didn't see that one coming," the man said between huffs. "Now talk," Jane said. "Information on your life. Who were those guys back down when you gunned down that group? Are they cannibals? Where is our group?" "Don't know what you're talking about," the man muttered. Jane pushed the barrel of the gun against the man's head. I'm not going to ask again, Jane said. You said that your group was already dead earlier. That means you know what we saw. You know about that group? There was a long pause from the man. Jane was getting more frustrated with each passing moment before the man said, All right, I hope you're up to snuff. What is that supposed to be? Zeke asked. The man looked over at him and said, I'll answer the questions, but then you'll have to do something for me. I already told you what trade is going to be, Jane said. You answer our questions and we might let you live. The man then turned to Jane and scoffed. You'll understand once I've answered your questions. You see those people you just saw? They're a part of a community called Hayfield. And yes, they're cannibals, but some of them don't know this. What are you talking about? Zeke asked. The man turned back and said, You see, there are farms with livestock surrounding the community. Some of the residents believe they're eating livestock, but most of the time it's human meat. Zeke and Jane were disgusted to hear this. How do you know all this? Jane asked. He looked to Jane and said, I figured it out. I noticed that they usually had the same amount of livestock when they had meat on the menu for dinner to feed a whole community of people. It seemed that the only explanation. As soon as I connected the dots, I swept out mine and my kids' diet for oatmeal and watch whatever I have out there. You have a kid? Jane asked. Yep. Name's Danielle, the man said. I find that hard to believe, Jane said. I've been straight with you so far, the man said. To answer your final question, I would think that your group is within the community. Some of the group members from Hayfield that aren't aware that they're eating human meat and come back out with a whole bunch of new people. There were some families in the mix. Hell, a couple new people were from my past, Russell and Wyatt. Zeke was shocked to hear this. It had to be them. Was there a girl in the group? The teenager with glasses on? She had shoulder-length hair? Yeah, actually, the man said. I think she's been likened to Jed. Zeke's eyes widened. He felt angry and a tad bit jealous. Why would she start dating someone else? Why would she? He then realized the last time he saw Sarah, he was attacked by walkers. Oh no, she must think I'm dead, Zeke said. Jane frowned and said, I'm sorry, you should have left me to find her. Zeke shook his head and said, Then I would be in that mess too. Damn it, she's going to kill me. I'll explain it to her, Jane said. It's my fault that you're out here to begin with. Look, Romeo, you have bigger problems on your hands than that Hispanic girl being pissed off about you, the man said. If you don't do something soon, they're going to kill one of your friends and serve him or her up for a plate of dinner. Another? Zeke exclaimed. Yeah, I noticed that there was this lean black guy that went missing just soon after the group arrived. Jonah always aims to kill off someone who isn't well liked or well known amongst the group of people. This black guy was an easy target. He didn't really talk to anyone in the group. He seemed like he didn't want to be here. I'm sure they're preparing for him for dinner as we speak, the man said. Fuck, Jane muttered. That must have been Mike. Damn it. Zeke tightened his grip and gritted his teeth. Prove it to me. Prove that you're saying that this is true, Zeke snapped. The man chuckled and said, Seems like I've overheard. You guys have more proof that they're cannibals as opposed to me. Jane huffed and said, Who is this Jonah guy? The leader of Hayfield, the man said. Don't let his charisma fool you. He's quite a mastermind. Has everyone wrapped around his finger. Well, mostly everyone. I don't trust for anyone except myself and sometimes my kid. There was a long pause between them before Zeke said, Why don't you and your kid leave the community knowing what you know? Ha, the man said. You're joking, right? If Danny and I leave, all we will do is put a target on our backs. Jonah will hunt us down. He'll kill me and use my body for dinner. The sick bastard. As for Danny, I'm not too sure. He'll either wait for her to get older for a meal or violate her. It's hard to tell. It's safe to stay within the community for now. I offer my services to Jonah as a scavenger in return. He doesn't hurt Danny while I'm out. She's out in the care with someone who wouldn't hurt her, and that's when the trade's been for 8 months. So you're trapped? Jane asked. Yep, the man said. How good are the defenses? Zeke said. The man laughed and he said, You really think you could storm that place? You two will die within seconds. The only way you'll get in is if I take you as prisoners and break you out before they use you as dinner. You will seriously expect us to trust you? Jane asked. Well, if you both don't trust me one by one, your group is going to get turned into food. And I'll be stuck in this shitty arrangement until my kid Jonah decides I'm not useful anymore and kill us both, the man said. No winners except for Jonah, and none of us want that to happen. There were a few minutes of silence between them. This time it was much more intense. Zeke huffed and said, We don't have anything to lose. We have our lives, Jane said. As opposed to lives of the people they care about, and even when worst comes to worst and we die, at least we'll see Jamie and Decker again, Zeke said. A few more seconds away before Jane lowered her gun and said, What do we have to do? The man smiled and said, Well, first I need my gun back. Second, I have to tie you both up. I'm going to regret this, Jane muttered. She handed the gun to the man who accepted it. The man proceeded to tie their wrists together, seeing as they had a long ways to go before they get to Hayfield. How about some introductions along the way? The man said as he finished tying up Jane's wrists together. Name's Nate. Zeke said. It was obvious that he didn't like this arrangement. Nate finished tying his restraints and grabbed their supplies and weapons. How about you, babe? Jane asked Jane. Go to hell, Jane muttered. Interesting name, Nate said with a smirk. He started to lead the way with his handgun out. Both Zeke and Jane knew this was going to be a long journey. Clementine's day seemed to have gotten better from the rough start. Having her adoptive parents around and comforting her as they helped. She had played some of the board games throughout the day with Gil and Danielle and her in Sarah's room. The former had been dropped off by Patricia and Randy. The latter was dropped off by Nate as soon as after. It was a while until she warmed up to Clementine and Gil. They were now playing Legos with Sarita, looking after them and Genevieve. Sarita and Genevieve were downstairs. Clementine was trying to build a car, but there didn't seem to be enough Legos to do that. I think I like it here, Gil said. He was addressing to the both girls. Clementine looked up at him and he continued, It feels like before the Walkers. That's good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I like it here too, but my dad doesn't, Daniel said. Why not? Clementine asked. Danielle shrugged and said, That's just how he has been. He doesn't trust many people. He's the only reason why he hasn't left. It's because it's easier to live here than outside. Good point, Clementine said. Gil frowned. He noticed how distant Clementine was. Are you okay? Gil asked. Clementine nodded and said, I told Mommy about what Carver did to me, and this morning I felt awful, like as almost bad as when I lost Lee. Oh, Gil said. Danielle seemed shocked. What did this Carver guy do to you, if you don't mind me asking? Danielle asked. He tortured me. He wanted me to hurt Gil, Clementine said. He cut my arms repeatedly for not hurting him. Oh, Danielle said. Don't worry, I was tortured too, except it was different. I try to be as normal as possible, but some days I just shut down. It doesn't help when I try to be tough for Dad. Like me, you're going to have some bad days, but I think in time you'll be okay. Clementine frowned and said, You shouldn't try and hide it. It hurts a lot when you do that. I already cried my eyes out over what happened. What's my point? My dad won't care of either way, Danielle said. Both Gil and Clementine were concerned by this. They hadn't known Danielle for a long period of time, but it seemed like she was solely lonely at times, and now that they fought about it, she did seem to try to mask this by appear as happy as sometimes silly. Danny, you don't have to act around like this. We're your friends, Gil said. My real friends wouldn't keep bugging me about it. It's in the past. Plus, you're little kids. You wouldn't even understand what I went through, Danielle said. She seemed rather harsh as she spoke up with surprise in Gil and Clementine. Can we please just go back to playing Legos? I don't want to talk about this. Gil nodded and said okay. Clementine nodded as well, but she felt bad for the girl. It was obvious what she went through was something more traumatic than what she went through. She would have to talk to her mother about it. She seemed to always know how to comfort an upset girl. The three turned to the doorway when they heard it open. They saw Sarah standing at the doorway. She seemed distant. However, she at least noticed some of the three children. Oh, hi, you three, Sarah said. Hey, Sarah, are you okay? Clementine asked. The girl walked past them and got onto the bed. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna unwind for a bit. Clementine frowned and said, Do you want to play with us? We're playing with Legos. There was a moment of silence as Sarah looked up at the ceiling of the room. Clementine turned back to Gil and Danielle. She figured that it was Sarah's way of saying no. However, her and her mom were friends' surprise. They heard the teenager say, "Maybe next time, Clem. I promise." "Okay," Clementine said. As much as she needed did what that Sarah had said yes. At least she was talking to her again. Clementine, Gil, and Danielle went back to playing with their Legos. "So what did you guys do today?" Sarah asked, which surprised Gil and Clementine. She hadn't had a normal conversation with anyone in over 2 days. "Nothing much. We've just been playing some board games," Gil said. "That's cool," Sarah said. She became quiet again and continued to look up at the ceiling. Clementine could tell that there was a lot on her mind, but at least there was some part of her best friend still inside.